Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time, we're going to kind of tackle trust.
Ooh, interesting.
What it is,
Okay.
why it matters,
Mm-hmm.
and why it feels like these days it's so hard to come by.
Yeah, it really does feel that way sometimes, especially in this digital age. It feels like trust is.
Yeah, and that's what we're digging into today with these three sources.
Okay.
One of them is Jordan Peterson talking about betrayal, actually.
Oh, wow.
And he compares it to a descent into the underworld. So
It's intense.
hold on to your hats, everyone. It gets pretty deep.
Okay.
And then we've got a couple of articles about how trust works or doesn't work
Right.
in the online world.
Right.
So our big question is, can we trust anything or anyone in the 21st century?
I think it's a really valid question to be asking, and these sources definitely suggest that there are some challenges to navigating trust these days.
Okay, let's unpack this a little bit, starting with Peterson's view on betrayal. You've read his work, so break it down for us. What's this whole underworld thing about?
So Peterson had this idea that trust is like the bedrock of our reality.
Okay.
It's the foundation that allows us to feel safe and secure in the world.
Okay.
But when that trust is shattered through betrayal, it's like the ground collapses beneath us.
Whoa.
And we're thrown into this like chaotic, disorienting experience that he compares to a descent into the underworld.
So it's like those classic hero myths where they go to the underworld, they have to face all these trials.
Exactly.
And then hopefully come out transformed.
Exactly. He even uses this vivid imagery of like snakes emerging from the depths, representing all the like hidden complexities and anxieties that betrayal kind of unleashes.
So it's like suddenly everything feels uncertain and unfamiliar.
Right.
Even if you're in a place that you know.
Exactly. Like you're surrounded by strangers.
Yeah.
Even in your own home.
So betrayal makes you question like everything you thought you knew.
Yeah.
But how can we use this idea of like an underworld to
Right.
deal with betrayal in our own lives?
Yeah, that's the key question, right?
Yeah.
And Peterson suggests that by understanding this archetypal journey,
Okay.
we can actually find meaning and purpose in those difficult experiences. It's about recognizing that betrayal is a universal human experience, that we're not alone in feeling those feelings of pain and confusion and loss,
Yeah.
and that by confronting those feelings, by venturing into our own personal underworld,
Okay.
we can emerge stronger and wiser on the other side.
So it's not about avoiding or suppressing those feelings.
Right.
It's about like leaning into them and integrating them into our experience.
Precisely. It's about recognizing that betrayal, while painful, can also be a catalyst for growth and transformation.
I love that
Yeah.
like betrayal can feel like the end of the world.
Right.
But it's actually an opportunity for a new beginning.
Exactly. And that brings us to this really interesting point.
Okay.
So Peterson focuses on this like personal level of betrayal, but our other sources highlight this broader societal trust crisis
Okay.
that's playing out in the digital age.
This is where it gets really interesting.
Yes.
You mentioned that I was concerned about data privacy in the notes for this deep dive.
Right.
So how does this societal trust crisis show up in our everyday lives? Give us the breakdown.
Well, think about it. We're constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
Yeah.
A lot of it's conflicting or even downright false.
Right.
And social media algorithms, they seem designed to keep us outraged and divided.
Yeah.
And then there are the constant data breaches and privacy scandals.
Right.
It's no wonder people feel like they can't trust anyone or anything these days.
It's like we're trying to build a house on quicksand.
Yeah.
So no wonder so many people feel this hero versus monster dynamic
Right.
the sources talk about.
Yeah.
What do they mean by that exactly?
So it's this tendency to simplify complex issues into good versus evil, with no room for nuance or gray areas.
Right.
And it often stems from this lack of trust.
Right.
We see it in politics, we see it online, we see it even in personal relationships.
Yeah.
Instead of actually engaging with different perspectives, it's just easier to demonize anyone who disagrees with us.
I've definitely noticed that online.
Oh, yeah.
It's like everyone's just shouting from their own echo chambers,
Right.
convinced they have the absolute truth.
Exactly.
And it can be pretty exhausting.
It is.
But why is this tendency to simplify things so damaging? I mean, surely there are bad actors out there.
Oh, of course there are.
Yeah.
But the problem is that this black and white thinking, it prevents us from having meaningful conversations
Okay.
and finding common ground.
Yeah.
It just fuels polarization and makes it harder to actually address complex problems that require, collaboration and understanding.
That's like this tug of war.
Yeah.
And nobody's making any progress.
Right.
So if this hero versus monster dynamic is so pervasive.
Right.
How do we even begin to rebuild trust in a world that feels so divided?
Well, that's what we'll explore in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
The sources actually offer some surprisingly hopeful strategies for rebuilding trust, both on a personal and a societal level.
Okay, I'm intrigued. We're going to dive into those strategies right after this break.
You're probably wondering, how do we actually move forward from this if trust is so fragile and the world feels so divided? How do we even begin to mend these broken bridges?
You read my mind because the sources kind of painted a bleak picture, so I'm curious what solutions they offer. They're not saying we should all go live off the grid and, renounce technology, are they?
Not quite. Although that might simplify things, they actually suggest a much more nuanced approach focusing on both individual actions and broader societal shifts. It's recognizing that rebuilding trust is a complex process, and it starts with each of us taking responsibility for our own choices and our own actions.
Okay, I like this. So what kind of individual actions can we take to, build more trust in our lives?
Yeah.
What can we do starting today to make a difference?
One of the most powerful things you can do is cultivate a practice of honesty and transparency in your own life. It may sound simple, but in a world where it's tempting to bend the truth or put on a facade, simply being genuine and upfront can have a ripple effect.
I can see how that would build trust.
Hmm.
If you're consistently honest even about small things, people will start to see you as reliable and trustworthy. It could be contagious, right? Maybe it inspires someone else to be more honest in their own interactions.
Exactly. It's about creating a culture of honesty, one interaction at a time. And it extends beyond just telling the truth. It's also about being transparent in your motives and intentions. If you're asking someone for a favor, be upfront about why you're asking and what you hope to gain. If you make a mistake, own up to it and take responsibility.
That takes courage, especially in a world where everyone is trying to present this perfect image of themselves. But it's refreshing, isn't it, to encounter someone who's just real and authentic?
Absolutely. And it's not just about our interactions with others, it's also about being honest with ourselves. Are we being truthful about our own values and priorities? Are we living in alignment with who we truly are?
That's deep.
Yeah.
So honesty with ourselves and others, that's a crucial first step. What else can we do on an individual level?
Well, remember how we talked about the hero versus monster dynamic and how it can kind of shut down meaningful dialogue?
Right.
One of the best ways to counter that is by cultivating intellectual humility.
Okay, break that down for
Yeah.
us. What exactly does intellectual humility mean, and how do we practice it?
So it's about recognizing that we don't have all the answers, that our perspective is just one of many. It's about being willing to listen to and learn from others, even those we disagree with. And it's about being open to the possibility that we might be wrong.
That's a tough one,
Yeah.
especially in the heat of the moment when emotions are running high.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would create space for more constructive conversations. If you're willing to acknowledge that you might not have the whole picture, it opens the door for dialogue and understanding.
Exactly. It allows you to approach disagreements with curiosity rather than defensiveness. And it helps you to avoid falling into that trap of black and white thinking.
So it's like instead of assuming the worst about someone who has a different opinion, you approach them with the attitude of, okay, help me understand where you're coming from.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And that kind of open-mindedness can be incredibly disarming. It can help to de-escalate conflict and build bridges of understanding.
Okay, I'm convinced intellectual humility is officially on my to-do list.
Yeah.
What else can we do?
Another important step is becoming more critical consumers of information. We're bombarded with content from all sides, so we need to develop skills to discern truth from falsehood.
It's easier said than done, right? Especially with all the misinformation swirling around online. How do we even know what to believe anymore?
It's definitely a challenge, but there are some practical strategies you can use. One is to always consider the source.
Okay.
Who is presenting this information and what are their motives?
So, if I see a headline that seems too good to be true, I should take a moment to check out the website or organization that published it. Are they known for their accuracy and objectivity?
Exactly. Look for sources that are transparent about their funding and their editorial processes, and be wary of websites that have a clear bias or agenda, especially if they're trying to sell you something.
That makes sense. Right. What else should we be on the lookout for?
Look for evidence-based reporting. Are there citations or links to reputable sources that support the claims being made? And don't just rely on a single source. Try to find multiple perspectives on the same issue to get a more well-rounded view.
That's great advice. So be skeptical, check your sources, and look for evidence. It sounds like a good mantra for navigating the digital age in general.
It really is.
Oh,
And it's not just about fact-checking. It's also about being aware of our own biases and how they might be influencing our perceptions. We all have preconceived notions and beliefs, but it's important to recognize them and be willing to challenge them.
so it's about being open to the possibility that we might be wrong, even about things that we feel strongly about.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that there's always more to learn and that our understanding of the world is constantly evolving.
Okay, so we've talked about individual actions like cultivating honesty, practicing intellectual humility, and becoming more critical consumers of information. What about the broader societal changes needed to rebuild trust? I mean, surely it's not all on individuals to fix this, right?
You're absolutely right. Individual actions are crucial, but we also need to address the systemic issues that contribute to this erosion of trust. And that's where things get a bit more complex.
Okay, I'm ready for the complex stuff.
Hmm.
What are some of these systemic issues that need to be tackled?
Well, one of the biggest challenges is the way that information is disseminated and consumed in the digital age. We've talked about misinformation, algorithms, echo chambers. All of these factors contribute to a sense of distrust and division.
It's like we're all living in our own little filter bubbles, surrounded by information that confirms our existing biases. How do we break out of these bubbles and start having meaningful conversations with people who see the world differently than we do?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And there's no easy answer. But one thing we can do is demand more transparency and accountability from the platforms that control the flow of information.
Okay, you've got my attention. What do you mean by transparency and accountability specifically? What would that look like in practice?
For starters, we need to understand how algorithms work and how they're shaping our online experiences. We need more transparency from social media companies about how these algorithms are designed and what data they're using to personalize our feeds.
So it's about lifting the curtain and letting users see what's going on behind the scenes. Because right now it feels like these algorithms are working in secret, manipulating what we see and how we interact with the world.
Exactly. And it's not just about understanding how they work, it's also about holding them accountable for the consequences of their actions. Are these algorithms promoting divisive content? Are they contributing to the spread of misinformation?
That's a tough one.
Yeah.
I mean, social media companies argue that they're just providing a platform for people to express themselves. But it's clear that these platforms have a huge impact on how we perceive the world and interact with each other.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to have these conversations and to demand more accountability. We need to recognize that these platforms aren't just neutral tools. They're powerful forces that are shaping our society, and we need to be more thoughtful about how they're being used.
Okay, so transparency and accountability for social media companies. What else needs to change on a societal level to rebuild trust?
Another crucial area is the way we approach education. We need to equip young people with the critical thinking skills they need to navigate this complex information landscape.
So not just teaching them what to think, but how to think.
Exactly. We need to teach them how to evaluate sources, identify bias, and construct well-reasoned arguments. And we need to help them to develop a healthy skepticism towards information, especially online.
It's about empowering them to become informed and discerning citizens who can think for themselves and make responsible choices.
Exactly. And it's not just about young people. We all need to be lifelong learners, constantly adapting and evolving in this rapidly changing world.
I love that. It's about embracing curiosity and intellectual humility throughout our lives.
Exactly. And it's about recognizing that knowledge is power, and that the more informed we are, the better equipped we are to navigate the complexities of the world and to build a more trusting and equitable society.
Okay, so we've talked about individual actions and societal shifts.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, is there a link between these two levels? Do they influence each other?
That's a great question. And I think the answer is a resounding yes. Individual actions and societal changes are interconnected and mutually reinforcing.
So like if more individuals start practicing honesty and transparency, it can create a cultural shift that influences institutions and systems to become more accountable.
Exactly. It's like a ripple effect. When we change our own behavior, we create a ripple that can spread outwards, influencing those around us and ultimately shaping the world we live in.
I love that image. It's empowering, isn't it, to think that our individual choices can actually make a difference in the grand scheme of things.
It really is. And it reminds us that rebuilding trust is not just a lofty ideal. It's something that we can all contribute to, one action at a time.
So we've talked about rebuilding trust on like a personal level and a societal level, but I want to bring it back to something you said earlier, that whole idea of betrayal as a descent into the underworld. How does that analogy apply to the digital world, especially when we're talking about things like misinformation and online scams?
Hmm, that's a really interesting question. I think the underworld analogy is surprisingly relevant to the digital age. If you think about it, the internet can be a really dark and confusing place, full of hidden dangers and unexpected twists. It's easy to feel lost and disoriented, like you've stumbled into a realm where the rules no longer apply.
It's like that feeling of being catfished,
Right,
right? You
exactly.
think you're connecting with someone real, and then it turns out to be like a complete fabrication.
Right.
It can really shake your faith in online interactions.
Yeah, and it's not just about romantic relationships. It can happen in any online space.
Right.
You might join a community or forum that seems welcoming and supportive only to discover that it's full of trolls and toxic behavior. Or you might invest in a product or service based on glowing online reviews only to find out that it's a scam.
It's like that sense of the ground crumbling beneath you, that feeling of being betrayed by the very technology that's supposed to connect us.
Right.
It can be really disheartening.
It is. And it's easy to see how these experiences can lead to cynicism and distrust. Not just of the internet itself, but of people in general. It's like that snake in the garden metaphor that Peterson uses. The internet, with all of its potential for connection and innovation, also has this dark underbelly
Right.
that can unleash chaos and uncertainty into our lives.
So if the online world is like this digital underworld
Right.
full of potential pitfalls and betrayals, how do we navigate it safely and effectively? How do we build trust in a realm where it often feels so elusive?
Well, I think it starts with recognizing that the internet is a reflection of the real world. Just
Yep.
like in real life, there are good actors and bad actors online. There are
Mhm.
trustworthy sources of information, and there are those who seek to deceive and manipulate.
Mhm.
And just like in real life, we need to develop skills and strategies to discern the difference.
So it's about bringing that same level of awareness and discernment that we use in the offline world for
Exactly.
our online interactions. We can't just assume that everything we see or read online is true.
Yeah.
We have to be critical thinkers,
Right.
question our assumptions, verify information before we just accept it as fact.
Exactly. And just like in real life, building trust online takes time and effort. It's about finding reliable sources of information,
Okay.
connecting with like-minded individuals, and being cautious about who we trust and what information we share.
It's about building those digital relationships based on authenticity and respect and shared values.
Yeah.
Just like in the offline world, we need to cultivate a sense of community and belonging online.
Yes.
And that starts with each of us choosing to be trustworthy and reliable in our own online interactions.
Absolutely. It's about being mindful of the information we share, the way we communicate with others, and the online spaces that we choose to engage with, and recognizing that our online actions have real-world consequences.
Right.
Just like in real life, our words and actions online can impact others either positively or negatively.
So even though we might feel anonymous or detached online,
Mm-hmm.
it's important to remember that we're still interacting with real people, with real feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And just like in the offline world, we need to treat each other with respect and kindness.
Exactly. And that brings us back to that idea of forgiveness that we talked about earlier. Just like in real life, we're bound to encounter hurt and betrayal online, but holding on to anger and resentment will only poison our own experience. Forgiveness, both of ourselves and others, is essential for moving forward and creating a more positive and trusting online environment.
It's about recognizing that everyone makes mistakes, both online and offline. And sometimes the best way to rebuild trust is to offer grace and understanding, even when it's difficult.
Absolutely. And it's about recognizing that the internet, with all its flaws and challenges, also has the potential to be a powerful force for good. It can connect us with people from all over the world, amplify our voices, and inspire positive change.
So while we need to be aware of the potential dangers of the digital underworld, we shouldn't let fear and distrust overshadow the incredible opportunities that the internet offers.
Exactly. It's about finding that balance between healthy skepticism and a willingness to believe in the good in others, both online and offline. It's about using our critical thinking skills to navigate the digital landscape while still maintaining a sense of hope and optimism about the future.
It's about remembering that we're all in this together, both in the real world and the digital realm. And by working together, we can build a more trusting, more connected, and more compassionate world.
Well said. I think that's a perfect note to end on.
It has been a fascinating exploration of trust, betrayal, and the challenges of navigating the digital age.
Yeah.
We covered a lot, from the depths of personal betrayal and the complexities of online interactions.
Yeah.
We talked about the importance of honesty and intellectual humility and forgiveness and critical thinking. And we explored ways to rebuild trust, both on a personal and a societal level.
Right.
But most importantly, I think what we really saw is that trust is not something that is given freely. It's something that must be earned and nurtured and protected. And it requires constant effort and vigilance, both in the real world and in the digital realm.
I agree.
Thank you all for joining us on this journey, and we hope you'll continue to explore these ideas and find ways to build more trust in your own life and in the world around you.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay hopeful.
And remember, trust is a journey, not a destination. It's something we build one step at a time, one interaction at a time, one choice at a time.